As you'll know if you've watched these videos for a while, when we speak, our voices are shaped by movements of the vocal organs, the tongue, the lips, and so on. But without the larynx, this small organ in your neck, there's no voice there to shape. All the details about your accent and the personal quirks of your own speech are still stored in your brain, ready to be deployed in speech, but no speech can emerge. Sometimes the larynx has to be partially or completely removed, for example, because of cancer. And while this is obviously a life-saving surgery for those who have it, it can have an impact on your life going forwards that I don't think most of us can really imagine the full scope of. Speech is such an important thing for most of us that we just treat it as a kind of default thing that we can just do effortlessly. But without it, it becomes incredibly difficult to express your social identity. And for many people, it can feel like a loss of identity. Nowadays, people who have had laryngectomies can often partially regain their ability to speak by redirecting air through the esophagus and using some of the esophageal tissue as a kind of proxy for the vocal folds in the larynx. And it's this kind of technique that makes possible what you saw at the start of the video. This was a choir of mostly, I think, people who had had laryngectomies and some people who hadn't, singing a composition written by my friend Ted Riley specifically for this choir about the voice and the impact of losing it. This event, Louder Than Before, was put on by the charity Shout at Cancer, directed by the fantastic Dr. Thomas Moores. And one of the things I personally liked about a lot of these musical compositions was how they played to the unique character of esophageal speech that these patients now use. And you can hear that a little better from some of these recordings I got of the non-musical pieces in between.
For years, I lonely wandered the streets of Soho, lost alone. My voice lost amongst all the background noise. But then one day, I had the amazing idea. Why not grab the microphone and be in front of the crowd? That way at least they'd have to listen to me.
The esophageal voice is very low-pitched, more so than the average laryngeal voice, and I thought the compositions did a very good job of working to the strengths of these voices and presenting them as part of the range of ways in which a human can talk, rather than pushing them to the side or something like that. And this was obviously largely down to the strength and practice of the patients, given that I understand it's pretty strenuous and difficult sometimes to produce esophageal voice. Alongside the performances, there was also a presentation by Professor David Howard. You might have noticed in the first clip I played that MRI recordings had been taken of the singers singing the pieces with their unique vocal tracts. But a team of researchers alongside Professor Howard developed a way of 3D printing a scan of the vocal tract which could be used as an organ, as a musical instrument, retaining properties of the voice of the person whose vocal tract it was.
So just to end this, here is the sound. Here's the vocal tract. And I hope you could hear an R vowel.
By sheer coincidence, Professor Sophie Scott was also involved in the project, and she was my master's supervisor when I was at UCL. She's the head of the Institute for Cognitive Neuroscience at UCL, and she was involved in the dynamic MRI element of the project that I've just mentioned. This was the first time something like this had been done. As you'll know if you've been in an MRI, they're incredibly loud, and attempting to sing in one in a way that can be later synced up to a live performance was a significant challenge to overcome, especially for people who are in the process of rehabilitating their voices anyway. So just to clarify things a little bit, what does the larynx do and what doesn't it do? Well, it obviously has the very important role of controlling whether air can get between the lungs and your mouth, but in terms of speech, it generally controls voicing and pitch. Voicing is the production of this tone, this sound, which you use in some speech sounds and not others. So for example, the sounds f, p, t don't have voicing, and the sounds v, b, d do have voicing. And in fact, those 6 sounds that I've just given as examples form three pairs of sounds where the main difference between the two sounds in the pair is whether they're voiced or not and when the voicing starts. So the larynx is doing the majority of the legwork in distinguishing the word pin from the word bin, or the word tear from the word dare. Pitch also plays an important role in communication, which varies from one language to another. You probably already know that some languages are tonal, which means that particular words have particular pitch contours baked into them, and the pitch contour can be the only thing distinguishing two words. But even in English, which doesn't use that kind of lexical tone, pitch is still used to communicate things. She's going to the shop sounds like a sort of informational statement, whereas she's going to the shop sounds like a surprised exclamation or question. The difference between good morning and good morning could change the whole direction of a conversation. Obviously, I've picked kind of exaggerated examples there to make it obvious, but we're using pitch to communicate things literally all the time. Once you've learnt to use the voice prosthesis, which by the way requires an extra surgical procedure to make it possible, you can obviously achieve voicing, which is how the members of the choir were able to sing and speak in the clips I showed you. But pitch control is apparently more difficult. I have this paper here, which is admittedly 20 years old, but it found that people who'd had laryngectomies and were using voice prosthesis could move around within a small pitch range, but couldn't control it as well as somebody who had a larynx, which has all sorts of little muscles for tensing the vocal folds and things like that. To bring it back round to the choir, obviously this more limited pitch range is going to change the way that you have to approach singing. And that's why I like this event so much, because it would be very easy for someone who still has a larynx to say, oh well, there's voice prosthesis which works a decent amount of the time, so it's basically solved. But of course the problem isn't solved. There's still the issue of limited pitch range, singing in a completely conventional way being basically impossible, expressing yourself through intonation being very limited, keeping pace with other people in conversations being limited, and also the issue of perception. Esophageal voice sounds different from laryngeal voice, and I imagine as long as people aren't very aware of it, you'll have to deal with surprise, troubling reactions from people who haven't heard it before, going into new social situations and not knowing how understanding or accommodating new people are going to be, having to re-explain the whole thing every time you meet someone new, which might involve delving into memories that you're not in the right emotional state to relive. And as long as all of these things are true, I think there's obviously still work to be done. And there's also the fact that, esophageal voice is not possible for everyone. Not everyone is able to do it. I think that this event and the charity in general go a long way towards achieving those goals. And they're not just providing opportunities to the people who've undergone the surgery, but the people who've undergone the surgery are doing a great service to the rest of us as well, in showing that when such an enormous challenge befalls someone, it's possible not just to cope with it, but to push the boundaries of achieving the same kind of expression you were capable of before the surgery. Because at the end of the day, this kind of thing could happen to any of us. It could happen to me in 5 years, and it's, I feel greatly inspired by watching people for whom this has been their reality, pulling through, coping and thriving. One of the members of the choir, Tanya, gave a very touching account of the loss of her pre-surgery voice and all of the issues of identity that were tied up in that.
I still hear my old voice most days. I think in it. I dream in it. And sometimes when I'm asleep, it catches me by surprise. I'll speak in my dream, and there it is, just like before.
And Shout at Cancer have done all sorts of, explored all sorts of different avenues of expression. I think there was a project about beatboxing a few years ago, which I wish I'd been present for. I'd like to thank Ted Riley for getting me involved, thank Dr. Thomas Moores for letting me be involved in the small capacity that I am being involved. And and of course all the members of the choir for letting me witness that, and giving me, I suppose, giving me the reason to go out and look for other information about this. I haven't just kept up with Shout at Cancer's work. I've also listened to another podcast episode about the issue of identity after voice loss. So it's opened up a whole new kind of area of interest for me, and it's been wonderful to meet some of the people involved in those projects and to witness them happening. So I'd highly recommend, if you have the time, the money, to sort of look into Shout at Cancer, see if they might be doing anything in your area, donate to them if you can, and I will just leave you with a couple more short bits of footage from Louder Than Before.
She says goodnight and I don't come aboard.